another tweet that you've tweeted. You're in his DMs. I'm in his therapist's notes. We are not the same. John, why are you in his therapist's notes? Welcome back to That's a Gay Ass Podcast, the podcast that asks, whose fault is it that you're gay? It is John Kung on the podcast this week, the chef and author of Kung Food. He not only has delicious recipes, a delicious online presence, and he's also really fucking hot. Ugh, it is such a good week. It really is. That's a Gay Ass Live show is tomorrow. We did sell out, but they released like 20 extra tickets if you're in LA and you would like to come. It's a late night show, so it's going to be slutty, and my parents will be there. I know. Buckle the brunch up. It's also a good week because, dare I say, a life-changing article came out in Variety magazine about this very gay-ass podcast. It's in print. It's got a full fucking page. And listen, you hear me talk a lot about imposter syndrome, but after this article came out and I got to read everyone's messages, you got me, gal. I felt good. I felt the win. And I'm proud. I'm proud of us. We're doing it. We're doing the damn thing. I was able to find one thing to complain about, and I put that on the Patreon for this week's Gay Ass Sex with Liz Cully. She's the host of the very popular Cool podcast, where we hear about what omnisexual is and how lesbians get slutty. That's on patreon.com/gayasspodcast. And that is where I'll also be releasing the video from this week's Gay Ass Live show with Margaret Cho, Gus Kenworthy, Dwayne Perkins, Pat Regan, and IMHO The Show. We're going to get into this episode with John Kung. He talks about what it's like being in a 10-year relationship with someone who has the same name as him, the literal pennies he spent to buy a home in Detroit, his ADHD journey, and the naughty slips he drops in his TikTok vids. Slay! John Kung is on That's a Gay Ass Podcast, the author of Kung Food and also a fitness queen and ADHD dream. John, thank you for coming on That's a Gay Ass Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm so good. And I have to tell you the BTS of how I found you, which is my dear friend Grossy Pelosi had done a few videos with you. And now I've gone down the John Kung rabbit hole and I'm obsessed.
Thank you. Dan is amazing. What a great person. We were actually got introduced through Andy. Dan came to one of my pop-ups and we had always been like in each other's periphery. And then I got to meet him and make food with him just once. And I was just like, oh, can we be friends forever?
That's exactly how I felt. And yeah, I'm such a fan. He's done the podcast twice. And I just know that if he's friends with John, then John is a friend to all. And I have to tell you that I've done a deep dive here and there's a lot to discuss. And I'm going to open up with a controversial tweet that you tweeted, John, if that's okay.
Awesome. You found my Twitter.
I did. And let me just say, the tweet I'm bringing up is, hate to get political, but you tweeted, I want to be cremated when I die, and I want someone to put a glitter bomb in my urn that activates when the lid is opened. John, who's going to open your urn after you croak?
I don't know. I don't know. But really, like, does it matter? Like, why are you opening it in the first place? What are you checking? What are you checking?
And you deserve the glitter bomb to the face when you open.
Exactly. And also, like, when it happens, you know those like the party whistle things that like unfurl when you blow them out, and it has that kind of like tiny little horn sound. I want that to be the noise.
Yeah. Do you have any sort of visual design in mind for the urn that your dust goes in?
Oh. Probably one that's just easily opened.
You're a gaslighter post death. You're just begging. You're like a fire alarm in 8th grade.
Yeah.
Do you
do you want your? I can't believe we're going into first how you want. We're talking about your ashes a minute two, but John, do you want your ashes spread anywhere after you die? And if so, where?
I actually don't want people to think about it too much. Like I have this issue when it comes to like death, where like people being, I don't want to say a burden, but people having requirements after they've died
of
other people, where it's just like, why? Like, who cares at this point? Why do people feel like obligated to go and like in Chinese culture? Actually, this happens like the day right before my birthday on the Chinese calendar, and it's like the day where you're supposed to like go and pay respects to your ancestors and like sweep the tombs and clean out the graveyards and stuff like that. I was like, I don't want anybody to clean my house after I'm dead. I don't want anybody to feel like they have to do anything after I'm dead. I think like I've got family that's spread all over the world, and it would be kind of nice if like nobody really had to do anything involving me after I'm gone. Shoot me up, put me on a firework and just shoot me into the sky. I'd just be like,
is that a part of Katy Perry's lyrics?
I thought it was Taylor Swift, wasn't it?
Sorry, it was Taylor.
I wanna be fireworked into the sky, sky, sky. I love that you're a low maintenance girly even post time on this plane. So are you then a people pleaser in your living life?
I mean, I'm a cook. I feel like that's like I feel like everybody.
The profession for people pleasers.
Yeah.
Well, you have such an interesting history. I mean, let me just, before I get into the famous podcast question, let me just go through the stats. Born in Los Angeles, raised in Hong Kong and Toronto, living in Detroit. You've been with your gorgeous boyfriend, John, for 10 years.
Yes.
You graduated from Eastern Michigan University with a bachelor's degree in theater arts, which we'll put a pin in that and go to that. Also creative writing. And then you got a law degree. So, John, you are a bit of a unicorn gay cook in Mish. Question one is, this bachelor's degree in theater arts.
Yeah.
What was your starring role in high school that you think should have gone to Broadway?
Oh, actually, you know what? I was never really in a lot of plays in high school. I was like a couple of background, like I didn't even dabble in like school theater productions until like it was my senior year of high school, and like I was in like one show. And it was like a background character thing. And it wasn't like that even a big of a deal. I was just
What was
like,
the show?
It was, oh, God damn it. It was like a Western rendition of a Shakespearean.
Sure.
Yeah, of course. It was.
We love a Shakespearean play put in the wild, wild West.
Yeah.
So then why did you decide to do theater in college?
I was just in general studies for a while, and then I took theater as part of my requirement, and I was like, I kind of like it here. I kind of like it here. You know, as a gay who is just finding yourself, you just wanted to be around other people who were, and yeah.
No, that's exactly why I think I started to do theater. I think it sort of became into like a sickness of wanting it to be a career, and luckily I've sort of like woken up from the awfulness of the theater industry, which of course I'm dreaming of like making my TV money and then pulling a Jesse Tyler Ferguson, pulling a Rachel McAdams, who's doing her play right now. But like when I was in 6th grade and I visited my older brother at his high school where he was playing in the orchestra of Once Upon a Mattress, I could just like smell the gay, and I just like was like, I want to be where the people are.
Yes. And like, I don't know. I still, the theater is such a cursed.
I'm going to tell you something. I think this is okay to say. I interviewed someone who is a composer of a Broadway show and his episode hasn't come out yet. And within the time that I interviewed him, and days later, they announced the show's closing.
Yeah,
like that's how brutal the industry is, and like. It's just, I mean, I'm glad that you at least had your gay community at Eastern Michigan University, but then you went to get a law degree and then ended up being this like amazing cook there's a story there.
It was an interesting trajectory. The law degree came from the fact that, I graduated in 2008, 2007, and it was like the height of the recession, and I took one step out into the real world, and I was like, oh, no.
Theater arts and creative writing bachelor's is not gonna.
Right. I pretty much like, it was the equivalent of me just stepping out into the world with like just a suitcase in my hand, and it was just like there was a tumbleweed that just drifted by, and there was just nothing, and I was like, oh, what can I do? I can go back to school. And so I had just applied for law school at University of Detroit, and I got in, and I was just like, well, I'm here now. I got the degree. I actually worked for the prosecutor's office for like a year or 2 years.
Wow.
And then while I was in law school, because it was the only creative outlet that I felt like was worth my time, was worth like taking time away from my studies, I taught myself how to cook.
Wow.
I didn't really have anything to do with food until I went to law school. So
it was almost like one might call it an escape from
yeah, totally. It totally was.
Did you, I don't want this to be like an Us Weekly interview, but I do need to know, were there gays in law school with you? And did you have a gay Elle Woods? Was there like, we've got to hook up in the stacks to blow off our steam?
No, I mean, like, unfortunately there were not, like, not in any that like I found to be all that great. Detroit was an interesting place back then. There were very, very few young people that actually lived in the city, and I was one of the few people who did. And that actually, gave me a pretty big leg up when it came time to like, buy a place for myself. Detroit, fun fact, has like the 3rd or 4th highest level of millennial home ownership in the United States.
Well, I've actually heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard that because I am from the Midwest, and I, know how impossible it is to buy a home where I was living in New York and now where I live in LA, and the homes I would only dream of owning
I think
property.
it was like 2011 and 2012. Again, there was absolutely, I think Detroit had maybe just declared bankruptcy or was about to. It was in like a huge amount of trouble, and nobody could imagine that it was going to go anywhere, much less like be where it is today. And it's like amazing, like, comeback era. But at that point in time, I bought a condo for $15,000. It was a foreclosure, but it was like a turnkey. Like it was like a turnkey. Like it was a nice 1,100 square foot unit.
Was it the site of a mass murder?
No. It was just like, it was at that point at that point of time. It was like one of those like, you could buy a house for $1 type situation. They were talking about that, and I was like, or you could buy a really nice apartment for like $15K. Like,
holy shit! I'm sure me and anyone listening right now is probably,
it's wild. Nobody thought about like even back then. Like it was such a punchline. Like that. Like the homes were going for insanely cheap amounts of money. Nobody thought that like, well, if like a decent house could be being foreclosed for like $1 or a barely like livable house, like imagine what like a nice home would cost.
Yeah. Well,
nobody
you were
thought about
so
that.
smart too, because
but I only realized that because I happened to live here, and I saw that there was even at the time there was like an amazing underground music community, a great tiny gay community that was down there, but none of them were at my law school. But like imagine like the city that was built for 2 million people, and we would gather at one bar on Thursdays, and it was like every gay that lived in the city. Like it was wild.
I mean, there's so much. That TV show I would absolutely watch.
Right.
It's like the Detroit G word.
Right.
But I do want to get more into what it's like to be gay in this now sort of Renaissance era of Detroit. But I do want to first go back and to ask the famous Gay Ass podcast question, which is, John Kung, whose fault is it that you're gay? Who do we blame, babe?
Whose fault is it? I'm going to point to. Do you remember? I don't even know who that studio was, but I just saw it played on like some retro Instagram meme page.
Hmm.
I saw like an opening thing for a show called Silverhawks. It was like back in the Dino
Ooh.
Rider, like Thundercats era. It was like a Hasbro turned into like a look, we have these
Oh
toys and let's
yeah,
make a
yeah, yeah,
TV show out of it. And I think I was like maybe I don't know, it was like an 80s thing. So
yeah.
I was like in my single digits. But yeah,
Mhm.
those muscly, shiny people. It was the two things that it was the combination of two things, like 80s homoeroticism in cartoons, and they were in shiny outfits, and their wings they were capes. Every single one of them
Hello?
had taffeta capes in the shape of wings. I think that's what made me gay.
Listen, a taffeta cape with a twin set of pecs attached to a lycra bodysuit.
There you
Honey,
go.
what are you going to do?
There.
Not sit on a D?
Yeah,
I have to
exactly.
say, this, well, when I'm looking at this poster for Silverhawks, you're describing it so beautifully because even though I had not watched this show, I can picture the characters moving. I can picture your eyes lighting up watching the television screen. I can picture the confusing fantasies you have. Now, when you were first exposed to the Silver Hawks, where geographically were you since you lived all over?
I think I was in Canada because I moved there when I was like 4 years old.
Toronto,
Toronto.
if you're nasty.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're living in Toronto, and did you find yourself able to act out any of these fantasies in person, or did you have to wait until you were out of your parents' home?
Unfortunately, I never was like I finished high school when I was in Hong Kong, so I wasn't able to like explore Canada by and large in that way, even though like Toronto itself was one of the first like actually progressive major cities in North America, at the
Yeah.
time. And so it wasn't even until then. So like Hong Kong is interesting because Hong Kong is socially speaking, at the time, it always seemed like it was like maybe 5 or 10 years behind whatever was going on in
Mm.
the West or United States or North America in general. So like even though it was like the 2000s or we were into the 2000s, I remember like when I was like 19 or 20, like still experiencing like cruising as a lifestyle and like meeting people
Mm.
in certain places, chat rooms and like just places that people knew of. Things that having the experiences that people my age didn't really need to anymore over here,
I
so to
see. It
speak.
was so you're saying it was very much still secretive,
Yeah.
underground,
Yeah.
behind closed doors. And this was the cruising in Hong Kong you're talking about?
Yeah, when I was in my teens. And so like interestingly enough, like I had that when I came to when I came to the States, when I came to Michigan and Detroit, like I found like I had a lot in common with people who in that sense, I had a lot in common with people who like grew up in the 80s as opposed to people who were just like myself born in the 80s.
Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting because there's a shroud of, an even deeper shroud of shame because you're probably not as exposed to the people living openly
Yeah.
or the attitude. So did that manifest then in the way that you related in terms of dating or sexuality at all? Did you kind of
Not
find yourself?
really. I think by the time I was in Detroit, I was going to law school, so I was like in my late 20s, early 30s at the time, or mid to late 20s at the time. And by that time, the shame thing had been done. At that point, it had just been like me relating to people having like similar experiences in terms like, oh yeah, I cruised in my teens as well, whereas like
Yeah.
so did you, but like nobody my age really. I think they were all on like Manhunt or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh God,
Arcade.com.
oh my God, I just had a flash to Manhunt. Can I tell you, I don't know if I've told this story before, but I talk about the shame. I was maybe 19 or 20. I just finished my freshman year of college in New York. So I was living there over the summer. It was my first summer away from home. And I talked to this guy, I think on Manhunt. And I naively, God, I was such an idiot, did not receive a picture of him. I just he lived close to where I was staying. I was lonely and horny. And I go to his apartment. I walk in. It immediately reeks of cigarette smoke, which was obviously a turn off because it came from parents who were like, if you smoke a single cigarette, you will burn. So I am not attracted to him.
Yeah.
He gets me a glass of water and he just starts talking to me. And I just knew in my gut I did not want to sleep with this man.
Yeah.
And even though I was a Midwestern people pleaser to the nth degree, I knew that I could get out of there. And so I said, hey, I have to go. And I extricated myself from the situation. And the second I leave the apartment door, I'm walking to the elevator. My dad calls me. I don't know what he was asking me about. And I pick it up and he's like, hey, what are you up to? And I was like, and I just had this wave of heat go over my body because I was like, look at what you're doing. You're going to a stranger's home to have sex. You're rejecting this man. You went there without even seeing his face. And it was just I was in over my head, but it was a very clear snapshot of where I stood in time, which was knowing that I wanted to explore, but not having the tools to do it in a way that was going to take care of myself or the person I would be with. And that Manhunt world, that it just was a different time, man.
And it's so funny too, because I feel like even dating today, people still have very similar versions of that same problem where it's authenticity, or it's going to get to the point where people are going to use AI, I'm sure, in some way to try to just enhance their photos or whatnot.
You're right. I mean, it's even like AI videos coming out.
Right.
But when you were in Hong Kong, were you able to explore at all your gayness?
I mean, yeah, we had gay bars there. They're still there. Some of them are still there. But I was only there in certain pieces after high school. I wasn't going there during high school, but when I was coming back almost once a year to see family and stuff, I would sneak off and just see these places and go to and attend these places. One time I was actually caught by my mom's neighbor at one of these bars, and bless her heart, I think she kept that secret for a couple years or
because you weren't out to your parents.
Because I was not at the time, so I was like, damn, she's a real one. Yeah,
that's a real I was gonna say that is a real one. When did you eventually come out to your parents?
I think I was solidly in law school at that time, by that time. And I was dating somebody seriously, and I had shown them a picture, that kind of thing. And they were fine. It was a very non-eventful type thing about it. It was just, we started talking, and that's really it. My mom adores my now fiance, Little John. And so
Mazel tov on the engagement. So let's get into that a bit, because you call him Little John, yes? And can you give us the backstory for, first, what was the meet cute? How did you meet your very handsome fiance?
It was on the apps, and then we had gotten together. We had found out that we had lived really close together, which is just rare during that time to meet somebody that you were interested that was only a few miles away. I don't know where you are located. Los Angeles. Okay, so you get it. Everyone's 15, 30 minutes plus away from each other in Los Angeles. I didn't know if you're in New York and you'd be 3 miles. You would people.
That would have been me a few years ago.
Yeah.
But now that I live here, I'm oh yeah. Well, So the magic of someone being so close to you within a short drive that you're actually wanting to connect with.
Totally. Unless you're in West Hollywood, in which case you're all literally on top of each other.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Right
I'm not there though.
Okay.
I rarely get to talk to someone who is engaged or with someone gay, dating someone with the same name. talk us through, do you have any advice for people who they meet someone that they're interested in, they have the same name? What are the dynamics and how did you get around any sort of confusion?
How did we come into our branding, pretty much?
Yeah, give me the brand story.
It just so happened, like, yeah, it was weird at first that we had this, that we have the same name, but because we're just so, like, and even like our spelling is extremely similar. We're still like Jon. We're still both like Jons, and so like we can't even be like, oh, John with an H, because that's neither of us. But because we looked so insanely different, and people just we kind of just let the brand happen on its own. People just started calling us Big John and Little John, and since I'm 6 foot tall and he's like 5'6", I think he might be 5'5".
Oh, I didn't realize there was that much of a height difference.
Yeah, it was like it was a really, really big height difference. So it was like, oh, this makes total sense. So like, and he's got a great humor about that kind of thing. Like he's totally accepted into like, his adorable pocketness. So since you are this now creator type, you've got this amazing audience on social media, this amazing cookbook. I know as someone who is also a creator that sometimes dating us cannot be the easiest or most like linear thing. What is the vibe of Little John in terms of, does he work in more of like a I don't know how you say that, like big boy job or grown up job?
Yeah, is it more?
Yeah.
Is he more of a corporate girl,
Yes.
or how does the relationship work with your creative journey?
Yeah, no, he's a consultant, and he has what I would consider to be like a traditional job with like with like a schedule and a timeline and stuff like that. It's still like a startup type situation, but it is like a job, and I think it works perfectly well simply because of how not online he is. Like
he has
like no updates on his Instagram. I think he just has an Instagram just to like be polite. In that situation, he doesn't really have a TikTok. He doesn't have any of those apps. He didn't know that we had YouTube Premium for like 3 years, and I was like, "Why are you watching the ads? Like you're on the family plan. Do you know not to use the
babe,
app?" Yeah,
babe.
Yeah.
Use the app,
right.
Babe. Does he watch all the content you post?
No, he doesn't. Like and it's not even.
How do you feel
like
about that?
I don't mind it. He doesn't like approach with notes or anything like that. Like sometimes he'll watch a video every now and then, but like he's not really interested in like the subject matter in terms of like food and cooking. He just likes to eat. Yeah. So he doesn't really care about cooking. He doesn't really care about food and stuff like that. You know what? I think he is most engaged when I make videos about the dogs.
Of course. There's that video that you posted of a follower sent you steaks that you then they instructed you to cook them for your dogs.
Yes.
And I fucking ate that video up. And there's another video where you were making apple chips, and then of course you do an ASMR where your dog is chewing the apple. Come on now.
Yeah, because like people chewing is like kind of gross, but then when it's like a dog just chewing and crunching on food, and I was like, this is beautiful. This is wonderful. I can listen to this forever. I'm at peace right now.
Well, part of the problem in my marriage is I for too long would go to my husband, who was also not really interested in the like creative journey of my content. I'd be like, "Do you think this is funny?" I would ask, "Is this good?" And it would cause some friction because he was not, I was looking for validation from someone. I was going to the wrong person. And I learned that he supports me in a huge list of ways, but the way that he does not want to support me is like being a part of the writer's room. Right. And I had to learn that that was not a knock on my work.
Yeah.
It was just the way that we coexist. And ever since I've gotten better about that, it's been so much more of like smoother waters, because I've now found who are the people I can go to with that. And the reason I can talk about it kind of openly now is because I wish there were people that were more honest about relationships and the actual difficulties of like the differences between the two of you with, whether that's cultural, whether it's religious, whatever it is. For us, it was just like, I am always buzzing with ideas, and I'm, like a self-diagnosed ADHD girl that is always loving to kind of spread funny ideas and messages. And he is so much more of a grounded person who likes to support in other ways. So I'm always interested when I talk to someone like you who has built this amazing career and following based on your creativity and your cooking. To be with a partner who is so different is always a fun yin and yang.
Yeah, I think going into the relationship, I've always been in the realm of food and had this like hyper creative job. When we met, I wasn't doing anything online. I wasn't doing any videos or stuff like that. Actually, quite the opposite. I was at that time operating a secret underground restaurant. And I remember like maybe our second or third date, like he was helping me do it.
Wow.
He was helping me cater a wedding. And it was like a really interesting situation where like we were catering the wedding of this couple who operated a circus school in Detroit at the time. And so obviously they had their own entertainment, but I was catering them. And I remember like having just a box of kale, because kale salad was really big at the time. And we did massage kale salad as as the salad course. And like, but the circus school was in like these converted apartment lofts. And so he had to wash the kale salad in like a bathtub. And the bride, and of course, like the bathtub was in like the only toilet that was in that apartment. So like literally the bride, while we were washing the salads, came in and she was like, "I'm so sorry, I have to pee." And so that was like our second date. And I got drunk and we were underneath some aerial silks when I was drunk at the end of it, and we were just like lying there, and I was like, huh. He was very much, and since then, he has always played like some kind of very supportive role in my work while also maintaining like a whole nother job of his own. So like hyper not creative, but absolutely like a person that was one of the factors that it all could happen.
Yeah, well, also like shows his investment and the involvement in ways that are natural to him. And that's Can you tell us, for that secret underground restaurant, what was the type of food that like you catered this wedding? What was the type of food that what made you so popular?
So I really came to my own as being like one of the only people that did any kind of Chinese style fine dining, but that eventually grew into just my interpretations of fine dining in general. I really blew up in like the Detroit food scene by doing tasting menus that were based off of like Hayao Miyazaki films, like Spirited Away. Blue Heron was the one that came out most recently. It won the Academy Award, but it was like films that animator had done, and that gave me a really like niche following. People would drive from Chicago and Toronto to come to like dinner at my secret studio. No advertising, obviously, because it was an illegal operation at the time. But yeah, and like the only way people would find out about us was on Facebook, because like that's where people actually still went. Like people would we would put an event on Facebook and people would share it around, and I only had like 16 to 32 seats at any given time. Yeah.
That's such a smart way to grow that buzz, because, it's like the supply and the demand of it all. And also it's so smart too, the connection to pop culture. I mean, one of my closest friends who is been on this podcast, Charles, he is a huge fan of those films. And like, I know he's listening right now, loving that was the angle you took, because it's so smart to couple that with actual cuisine that is not being done many places.
Yeah.
I want to stay on the food of it all, because did you find that obviously when the pandemic started, it was the time that you turned to social media. When you turned to social media, was your dream to grow the following, to have this cookbook, and what was that the plan?
No, like I was in the process of literally building a restaurant before the pandemic hit, and then that happened, and we were in lockdown, and while people were locked down in like their homes or apartments and stuff, we locked down in this one home that had a built-in restaurant inside. So like
Hmm.
our apartment had the restaurant across the hall in this random building in the middle of like a farmer's market district in Detroit. So like we were always set. We had space and we had pretty much my studio. I called it my studio. We had my studio there. And obviously I wasn't like hosting anybody over for dinner while we were in quarantine, but I was on TikTok already. I had been on it since it had stopped being Musically and
Hmm.
had converted to TikTok. So I was there early on. I was a big fan of Vine, and I understood TikTok back to be something special. There was really nothing on there for me per se, but I would, hop on, wake up in the morning, hop on, literally scroll past like 3 videos and be like, nope, I don't see anything here that interests me yet, but I recognize this as being special, so I'll check back in 3 months. Once the quarantine hit, I was already kind of like in it because there were
Yeah.
some like, there were like cosplayers and stuff like that. And I appreciate drag and I appreciate costumes of any kind. So like cosplayers were like great. But then people were starting to like share what was going on and share
Mm.
like how scared they were. And generally the people that were on TikTok at the time were super young. And I was like, well, what? I'm sitting at home. I don't know what to do. And so I guess I could like cook on video. Like, I could teach these guys how to make a frittata with the stuff in their
Yeah.
fridge. And that's what I started doing. I started making like survival food, stretching out a can of
Mm.
beans or like trying to make a chicken into like 3 dinners for the next few days.
That is
Um,
so dystopian in the most like it's so interesting to me that we're now living 4 years post the start of the pandemic. And even just 4 years ago, to think about you teaching people how to stretch out a can
Yeah.
of beans is like it's genius that you jumped in on the ground floor
Yeah.
because that is such a great way to grow.
And it totally changed my life as a result. I wasn't thinking about like building a social media following at that time because I don't think any of us understood what was actually going to happen. We didn't think that normal was going to happen again. I just like was like, oh, this is what we need to survive. And I feel like this is
Yeah.
how I can contribute. And so that's what I did. The following came afterwards. The world calmed down. We came back to some awful version of normal. And that just led me here doing podcast interviews and with a book.
Yeah, and by the way, the book, I mean, it's so beautifully put together. The photos you have, the recipes you have. I am so in awe of people like you and Dan Pelosi who can show their organic selves, their backgrounds, while also connecting people through food. And I dream of a day where I can be in the same room as you and Dan and just fucking gaying out while also chowing down.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask you a gay food question, which is you have videos on TikTok where you do dump and bake recipes.
Yes.
But in one video, you said you accidentally almost said dump and pump recipes, which is actually be a recipe for making babies. John, what would be a good dump and pump recipe?
I don't know. Too much rosé. That's it.
Rosé and a dream. I love that you sometimes slip in these really either gay or naughty or spicy or saucy references to your videos where they're actually educational and fun, but like you've got a secret freak flag, I would say.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I've always enjoyed that kind of like, if you know, tongue in cheek, like take to the camera and wink type humor.
It's what you don't say
exactly.
or what you don't show. Because you're in an interesting position where you're like this cook. You are obviously very smart, but you are huge into fitness. And I say this with all the respect and, PEC, but you've got a delicious body.
Well, thank you.
But you're also like, you're not constantly posting thirst traps, even though you could be. So there's almost like a power in that to me that it makes it even sexier.
Yeah, I think, there was in the earlier times, I was a lot more, I guess, liberal about like, cooking with my shirt off and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like I also found that like when that was a thing, that's what a lot of people would like talk about. So I like having those there, and I still do it sometimes. I just don't
Of
do it as much,
course.
so that's not like the only thing that people talk. I'm more than just this body, Eric.
I'm more than just these perky tits.
Exactly.
Well, don't worry. I did see on your Twitter that, a friend of yours told you that you should maybe post it out of close friends. And it was you saying your tits look good at the gym. And I thanked you for your cervix. But I do want to go into the next famous gay ass podcast question, John, which is a pop culture moment.
Mhm.
If the world was ending, you could only save one character actress. Who would you save?
Oh no, that is
Hey, John, you said you're more than just a set of perky tits, so prove it, babe.
Yes.
Who is she?
Okay. I think it might. This is okay. This is getting harder because I'm seeing more and more of them. Like as now they're in a line, and I have to pick one.
Sophie's choice.
Yeah, I know exactly.
It's gay Sophie's choice.
I am going to say Viola Davis.
Ooh, John, I knew you would deliver, and you delivered. Viola Davis, is it because you went to law school and she has been known to play a powerful corporate girly? Is it because she cried beautiful tears in doubt? Is it because what is it about Viola that really pulls you towards her?
I think it's because I don't want to say it out loud, but the first thing that came to mind was after that Michelle Obama movie. I think that she suffered enough.
Wait, what happened? What happened with that? Was
when she played Michelle Obama?
Oh, right. Is that how fast we forget? What was the controversy? Was it a bad movie?
I think it just was like just an interesting take on it.
Oh wow! Of course, when I Google it, the article is Viola Davis responds to criticism of her Michelle Obama portrayal. Wow. Well, hey, she says, win or fail, it is my duty to make bold choices.
Yes.
Which, that's again why we love our character actresses, the bold choices.
That's why she's a legend.
I love her so much. I mean, her filmography aside, which is the number one reason why I love her, she's truly one of those performers that is touched by an angel. I will say secondarily, her social media presence to me,
yes,
blows my mind. Who is what gay 22-year-old is leading her social media? That's what I want to know. Is it her?
No idea. But her contributions to like internet culture in general, that gif of her grabbing her purse and leaving, like that in itself just deserves a Nobel Peace Prize.
Absolutely.
Like, yes.
But then like on her Instagram, like there's postings of like very random memes and like clearly captions where she's trying to get engagement. I'm not shading her, but
No,
I am
but, like,
confused.
like
I'm like, this Oscar nominated actor is now posting, panda bear memes. I'm just confused as to what is being done and what continues to be done.
I think some people are just like naturals at social media in some way, shape, or form. Maybe she has good people, or
she's just like literally on the shitter, tweeting, posting memes. I hope whatever it is brings her joy, or that she's hiring a great gaggle of PR girls that brings her business. But there's some backstory there that I know is deep. I think it runs deep.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, it's a great answer, and I do want to a couple quick things before we have to end this delicious interview, which is another tweet that you've tweeted. You're in his DMs. I'm in his therapist's notes. We are not the same. John, why are you in his therapist's notes?
What was that what even I don't even remember what
Was it a fight with
inspired
Little
that.
John?
No, it was not. It was not. These random things that I just like put out there on Twitter. Sometimes they're just like one-liners that I just think about. This one might have been like inspired by like my ex who is a therapist now. But he was
Oh,
yeah. So therapy was always a very big part of my life, even though I've never gone. Um,
John.
I know.
John, I will be in therapy till the day I die and go into a glitter bombed urn. Are you joking? I love therapy. But speaking of, two things I want to make sure I ask about before we finish is one is you do tweet about having ADHD, and I last evening was with a friend of mine who just got on medication, and he's talked about how much it's changed his being able to be present, and I very much find myself struggling with the symptoms that would be considered to go along with ADHD. Do you feel comfy telling us your history with ADHD and maybe even if you have any sort of medicinal relationship?
Yeah, so honestly, well, as a person who studied theater in college, obviously I had ADHD, but no, it wasn't until I went to law school did I actually go seek out an actual diagnosis of it. So I am actually diagnosed. I was heavily medicated once I was in law school from an actual I had a prescription and everything. So like I had I had an extended release and then of God, what is it? Adderall. I was on so much Adderall at that time. And so the thing is, like, I did not appreciate the person that it made me, which was admittedly very productive. Very productive. And like I suddenly, like, after taking this pill, I became the student that I felt like I always should have been, or the student that my parents expected that I was supposed to be. And that made me, first of all, like, super mad that it was like, oh, it's this easy. All of a sudden, like, going to normal school and being normal in school is like attainable just because I took the equivalent of like a vitamin in the morning. So like there was that, and I think there was like some bitterness that was harbored towards that, but it made it super hard for me to access like the creative side of me, somebody that I had been super acquainted with for like my entire life, and all of a sudden, like, I wasn't really able to like come up with any of the ideas that I normally would, or live in the world. I liked the world that I was living. It was not easy. It was hard. It was a struggle to like adapt to regular society, but that doesn't really mean that like I didn't like it, especially having like seen what it was like not being, I guess, that person anymore. And so I think that might have been one of the reasons why I never pursued a career in law, because like I knew I would have to continue taking this medication in some way, shape, or form for the rest of my life. And I was just like, that doesn't sound fun.
Well, and you'd be losing out on a part of you that brings you joy and also makes you feel like yourself. Did you end up then tampering down on how much of the did you find like a happy medium?
Not on it anymore. I haven't been on it. I haven't been on it since I switched to a career in cooking, because as it turns out, being in the kitchen with ADHD is actually pretty much a good thing, because your focus is always your focus has to be on 6 other things at once. You have to constantly shift your attention and stuff. So flitting back and forth mentally in the kitchen was like something I was always good at.
Wow. I'm on anxiety medication on Lexapro, and I have a psychiatrist that I have considered going to talk to about maybe ADHD meds, but of course I need to hold on to some of it so I can, ask gay questions on the internet. So yeah, to be continued from my personal journey. Well, it is so inspiring to see you grow this platform that's all about connection, delicious food, a slight smattering of thirst, and I think that is exactly what the world needs. Now, I sadly have to ask you the final podcast question I did not prep you on, which is, if the beautiful capes of the Silver Hawks made you gay.
Mm-hmm.
John Kung, what is keeping you gay today? Is it someone you're following? Is it a pornography? Is it a certain dish? Is it a celebrity? What is it?
Oh, I would probably think it would be like, it is every new album that Beyonce comes out since self-titled. Yeah.
Beautifully said. Last week's episode with Kevin McHale, he went on an 8-minute TED Talk about the Cowboy Carter album, and I think Beyonce absolutely affirms my faggotry through and through.
In like the way where it's like, I don't know how she manages to be an aspirational gay figure in our lives, but she is aspirational in the sense that like you can never attain that. Nobody ever could.
No.
But
that's
like,
why it's aspirational.
Yeah, exactly.
You
exactly.
hope. You can only fucking hope. Well, John, thank you for coming on That's a Gay Ass Podcast. I truly enjoyed chatting with you. And can you tell the girls where to follow you and what to look out for?
Yes. So all my socials are at John Kung, except for Twitter, which is about the only thing that I'm okay with dead naming these days. But it's at Chef John Kung on Twitter. But you can find me on Threads at John Kung as well. So, and that includes YouTube. And then you can find my book pretty much in any major bookstore, as well as Amazon, called Kung Food. And you can listen to the podcast that I host alongside with RuPaul's Drag Race alum Kim Chi, called One for the Table. That is the number 1 for the table. And we're on all the podcast networks.
Yes. Obsessed with kimchi, obsessed with you. One for the table, wherever you get your podcasts. I will link to the cookbook and to the podcast in the description. And John, I will see you hopefully across a table soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to That's a Gay Ass Podcast with John Kung. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to tag us on social medias. And I just want to give a genuine thank you for all the messages I received about the Variety article. If you haven't read it, it is on my Instagram in the link tree. And I cannot wait to see a lot of you tomorrow at That's a Gay Ass live show. Join the Patreon to see that live video when it goes up in the next week. And I'll see you next week for another delicious guest.